Hey everyone, welcome to Good Wolf Radio. It's Jerry Scarlato, and today we're recording from our downstairs office after I got done with the workout because we just realized that we forgot to record the intro for this video. This is with David Robson, the author of The Expectation Effect, which is a fantastic book that teaches us about how our mind's keeping us from achieving our goals. David goes into big detail about new research that he's found about how our mind keeps us from our exercise goals, our nutrition goals, our relational goals, and so many other areas. So without further ado, remember, go get this book, The Expectation Effect, get your notebook out, and be ready for this interview with David Robson.
So before we actually get to the book, I started doing a little looking around on the interwebs to see what else I could find. And I want to talk about procrastination. How to stop procrastinating and start getting things done. So you wrote this article on, I think this was New Scientist.
Yeah, that's one that...
That sound about right?
Yeah, exactly, quite recently, I think like a couple of months ago maybe.
Yeah. So I appreciate this article because procrastination is like my favorite form of trying to work around fear of failure, which is like one of the very first paragraphs that you have in the article. So I'll quote from the article. Studies show that the higher our fear of failure, the more likely we are to procrastinate. If we then beat ourselves up, it is only going to raise our levels of stress and anxiety, which may cause us to look for more relief in temporary distractions, disrupting our task. To the result is a vicious cycle of self-sabotage. So, like I said, that's one of my favorite forms of self-sabotage, I guess is the best way to put that. Why did this topic pique your interest? Is that something that you find yourself doing as well, or was it just something that you've heard a lot of people talk about?
No, I mean, it is something that really bothers me, especially when I'm writing something that really matters to me. It's like you said, it's that fear of failure. With my book, say, I will manage to find any other task to do but writing my book. And often my procrastination is a kind of productive procrastination. So I'm often doing something useful, like writing a journalistic article, arranging interviews, all of that kind of thing. But sometimes you just have to sit down and actually do the thing that you're passionate about. And that's what I find I tend to put off. So I was just super interested in what the research can tell us about ways to avoid this.
What have you found that works for you? So there's a couple things that you say in the article, which we can get to in a second, which will also lead us to the next article that I want to talk about. But did you have any things that you did before that you kind of found worked for you, or once you got into the research, you were like, hey, I'm going to start implementing these things, and you found that those things were very helpful?
Yeah, I mean, the thing that I've done recently for the last couple of years is kind of setting myself arbitrary deadlines that are normally, considerably before the actual hard deadline. And what I find that does is actually it reduces that sense of anxiety that I would feel that is really bad for the creative process. So, even if I do a bit of procrastination and then I actually get on with writing, what I find is that then knowing I have this kind of extra buffer zone just makes it so much easier rather than feeling that I'm really pushing against the deadline. I mean, I know for some people, like, the deadline is the major motivation, like they thrive on that stress at the last minute, but I'm the total opposite. I get in this kind of panic that's very unproductive. So yeah, just kind of trying to set my own schedules and knowing that I've got a bit of relief if I do find writing a piece harder than it should be. That actually just kind of calms me down, and then it means that I kind of get on a lot more quickly. So that's my first major kind of strategy to dealing with procrastination. And actually, I think just the further I've got along in my career, the more I realise that, like, the first draft of what I'm writing is never going to be good, or you can't predict whether it's going to be good or not. But what is much better is to have just something in front of you that you can work with than having nothing at all. And again, that just reduces that anxiety. It's not like it has to come out perfectly the first time. it just has to be in a state at which I can kind of work at it, rewrite, edit, look for new avenues of research if I need to. I find that very comforting to know.
Yeah, it's funny. You mentioned the person that sets a deadline and then waits till the last minute, and that's what drives them to do that. That would definitely be me. I've tried to be the person who starts earlier, make sure to get ahead of the game and actually get the project done in some sort of structure, not waiting till the last minute until, deadline's tomorrow kind of thing. And I think it's been helpful, but yeah, people are people and we all have our own isms, and
Right.
for some it's you like that buffer, and I can get within a couple of hours and then find the energy to just boost through it. So it's pretty interesting.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I think we're learning with psychology more and more, is that there aren't any hard and fast rules that are going to work for everyone, and we have to actually embrace our individuality. So, you can have these studies that do show that on average these techniques work, but it's definitely going to be that some techniques work better for some people than others.
Well, and that brings me to the next article. The pleasure principle is a little bit of indulgence, the secret to success. This one you wrote for The Guardian, I believe. And this one, I believe, is a perfect example of what I like to call the pendulum problem in fitness, well, in anything in life, really. People say, hey, this is the thing that you got to do, or this is the thing that's working, or this is the study that comes out. And so everyone swings real hard to this side, and then there's a point of diminishing returns, just like anything in life. And people are like, whoa, 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 whoa. That's not the thing that we need to do. We need to relax. We need to take it easy. So the pendulum swings real hard to the other side. And so I feel like that's exactly what this article kind of was portraying, because in the marshmallow test, which is the infamous, perfect self-control, discipline, this is what happened when these people, grew up after they were able to withstand the marshmallow at whatever age they were.
6 years old, I think.
Yeah, exactly. So this was very interesting. Can you tell me more about just kind of this article in general? What got you interested in the finding about this particular piece, and then what you got out of it yourself?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's like you said, psychology tends to go from, one extreme to the other, and for decades the extreme had been this kind of very puritanical view of self-control, that it's all about delayed gratification, and any kind of indulgence is damaging, because the idea was, a small indulgence quickly snowballs into a larger indulgence. So, it might be helpful for you to have 5 minutes break in the middle of your working day to kind of, muck about on the internet, but the problem seemed to be that people can't stop at just 5 minutes and they waste the whole afternoon. Or you have one piece of cake and then, you eat the whole cake and your diet goes out of the window and you stop following your diet, in the days and weeks afterwards. And, there's recent research really questioning this view. So there's research showing that actually the most successful people, whether they're kind of students trying to get a high mark in their degrees, or whether it's dieters trying to lose weight, or exercisers trying to meet their fitness goals, is that we can all be a little bit more flexible. But the key thing here seems to be that you plan your indulgences in advance, rather than just kind of trying to keep up that willpower and then giving in to the temptation and then having all of that sense of shame and guilt that can come with that. Whereas if you're just up front, in your working day and you're just I'm going to spend, half an hour, midday, doing something I really enjoy that has nothing to do with work. Or if you're on a diet and you set one day a week where you can just treat yourself to whatever you want to eat, those people seem to be more successful. And I think it goes back to what we were saying about, the self-sabotage, the fear of failure. We have all of these negative emotions that we experience when we're trying to strive towards our goals. And if we have that fear of failure, and then if we do fail according to these kind of arbitrary criteria that we've set up, that shame actually makes us feel so bad, it really saps our motivation to continue. That's why our small indulgences tend to snowball into larger indulgences. But just by planning in advance, that is one way to kind of avoid that. Another way is just to show yourself more self-compassion. And there's loads of research now showing that people who are excessively self-critical are actually worse for things like procrastination and just sticking to their goals in general. Whereas actually, if you can show yourself self-compassion and, you don't keep on beating yourself up for wasting an afternoon, but you just realize the next day you can kind of make up for that time. Or if you're on a diet and you do have a cake because it's one of your colleagues' birthdays, but you're like, well, that was fine. That I wanted to share that moment with them, but tomorrow I'll just kind of go back to normal without any harm done overall to my goals. Those people are the ones who really succeed. So actually, we can just be a bit easier on ourselves. We don't have to, have that negative voice in our head like it's kind of a teacher from school kind of telling us off all the time. We can actually just be a bit more grown up about this, our whole kind of outlook on meeting our goals.
Yeah, that's perfect. And you talk about stigmatization in the book. I think that's a big part of it. Just labeling things good, bad, whatever, evil, just the label itself, the thought itself, failure being bad, success being good, those ideas in and of themselves are what cause a lot of this. I thought it was funny what they called it in the actual study that you referenced in this article, planned hedonic deviation activities. I love that name.
Right, exactly, or the idea of strategic indulgence as well. That's what we need to do, is to recognize that actually a bit of pleasure in life is what makes life worth living, and it's crazy if we're feeling guilty about that. But also, I just think it's about seeing the big picture. It's that trajectory that you're looking for. Whatever goal you're reaching for, you're looking for kind of improvements day after day after day. But it doesn't matter if one of those days you fail to meet up to your goals. It's if week after week you're kind of getting closer to what you want to achieve. And I think that's what we often forget. We think that one small deviation is the end of the world. It's like we're catastrophizing what should really be something quite negligible. And I think we just need to get over that.
Yeah, you can call it, the 80% rule or 90% rule, depending on how strict you want to be. But if you do what you say you're going to do 80% of the time, or you follow through with your the process that you're trying to put in place 80% of the time, likely is you're still going to get there. You may, if you slip up more often, it's going to be a little slower. If you slip up less often, it's going to be a little faster. But at the end of the day, you can always make a choice in the next moment. And I think that's why people struggle. Well, I might as well wait till Monday to start again, or I might as well wait till next month or next year, or whatever, so on and so forth. And that kills dreams more than anything else.
Yeah, exactly. And actually what we can do there is kind of take advantage of this psychological phenomenon called the fresh start effect. And that's essentially what you're saying, which is that, we like to have a kind of concrete landmark on which to start our goals afresh. So for most people, that's going to be the 1st of January of each year. But actually, a similar thing can work if you kind of see the end of your university semester as being like the fresh start for your new goals, or even just the beginning of the week, the beginning of the month, your birthday, the day after Easter. Any of these things you can set up as this kind of new beginning. And I think people who have good self-control are really good at doing that and saying, well, I might not have achieved what I wanted, in this chapter of my life, but I could just start a new chapter on this kind of relatively arbitrary date. So yeah, we should definitely constantly be looking for new starts rather than just thinking of the 1st of January as being the only time to make good resolutions.
And that's really what it's, I think self-discipline is misconstrued as what this article kind of, not your article, but what people look at it as is you have to be strict, you can't be happy, you can't do anything joyful, you got to be this serious stoic, don't enjoy anything in life, and that's discipline. But discipline, like you said, is really make a plan, say go have the cake, but then get back on it the next time, and then go have something else, go do something else, get back on it right after that. And that's really discipline. It's just following through with your word, following through with the process.
Right, exactly. And also it's like you said, like we kind of think that we have to make things as hard as possible for ourselves, like as grueling as it can be, the no pain, no gain kind of attitude. But effective exercisers are also just really good at choosing the exercises that they enjoy, so something that they find fun. Whereas ineffective exercisers will go to the gym and they will only select kind of the workout that is going to be most grueling. And that might be better for kind of, on that particular day, they might burn more calories, but they're far less likely to go to the gym like the next day and to keep it up
going.
day after day. Whereas if you do something that's enjoyable, even if you're not burning quite as much as you could optimally do, if you do that day after day after day, you're going to get to your goal far more quickly than if you keep on kind of falling off the wagon because you just hate it and you can't summon up the motivation.
That's good. So, what about, let's jump into the book. What if I came to you and I said, well, what if I just start thinking positively about this? What if I just was a positive thinker and just started saying, well, I love this and I love exercise and I love nutrition. Like, that's what the world tells us we can do. So why don't I just do that?
That would be great if that felt authentic to you and you really believed it. But I mean, I tend to kind of avoid that kind of advocating that kind of mindset because I think in general.
And why is that?
In general, we have to be realistic about the situations we're facing, and there's going to be difficulties, we have challenges, there's stuff that's beyond our control, and I don't think for many people we can be this kind of Pollyanna-ish figure who's just always optimistic. And then if we move into kind of movements like manifestation, this new trend where it's all about just visualizing good stuff coming to you, and then through this mystical law of attraction, it kind of comes towards you. I think that can be useful for some people for helping them to be proactive maybe in their life, seeing opportunities. But in general, I'm quite skeptical of that kind of idea as well. I don't think the scientific evidence supports it, and also it can kind of set you up for disappointment. Whereas, I think we have to recognise that we have to take positive actions ourselves, and our behaviours have to reflect our goals. So when I talk about the expectation effect, it's a bit more specific than just like positive thinking in general. It's much more about specific beliefs, about specific outcomes, and then that have been charted through specific mechanisms, and it could be changes to perception, to behaviour, and to our physiology. That's the science of the expectation effect, is that our beliefs can shape outcomes through all of those mechanisms, but they're very carefully defined, and they've been objectively, experimentally studied. So, my book kind of explores these expectation effects in lots of different areas of life, from, medicine and recovery from illness to exercise, dieting, educational performance, work performance, even how we age. But in each case, there's good objective science and a good scientific explanation for how that could occur.
Yes. One of the quotes that I found in an interview you did with Chris Williamson, I believe maybe last year sometime, on Modern Wisdom, you said our expectations that we have today are shaping our reality tomorrow. I think that that's a phenomenal, just a very succinct way of stating, like, what you believe is what you're going to get. What you think, who you are, what you see, what you view through your eyes is what you're going to get in front of you. So that was very succinct and a very great way to say that. At the end of the book, you talk about how just your beliefs in aging and your beliefs in what aging looks like will dictate potentially when you die. That was very eye-opening. So can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I mean, it's incredible, but it has been very carefully studied, and we're talking about people's beliefs in their 20s and 30s and 40s influencing their
That was the incredible part.
70, 80, 90, and it's not just how long they live, although the difference in lifespan between people with the positive beliefs about aging and the negative beliefs about aging is about 7 years, so, really incredible.
That's incredible.
But then it's also how well you age, so it's about how likely you are to get Alzheimer's disease. People with the negative beliefs are about twice as likely to develop Alzheimer's disease as those with the positive beliefs. And, that's measurable through the build-up of those amyloid plaques within the brain. So it's not just the kind of cognitive symptoms showing themselves, it's actually the biological mechanism by which the Alzheimer's is developing. And, so the first study came out in 2002. Since then, there have been lots of replications, and then lots of studies kind of looking at the mechanism. And again, it is a mixture of behavior and physiology. So the behavioral mechanism is kind of obvious, but also really profound when you think about it. And that's just that if you expect to kind of have some advantages to aging. So if you see it as a time of growth and wisdom, better decision making, time with your family, new opportunities after you retire, you're just going to be more motivated to look after your health. So you eat more healthily, you're going to stay more active. It's changing the health behaviors that we know influence aging. We know that aging is within our control to a certain degree if we look after our bodies. But then equally, if you think about the stress that can come with aging, then your beliefs about aging are going to shape that prolonged stress response. Put simply, if you are really negative and you see aging as being purely about decline and disability, all of those tasks that you do day to day, things like going to the shops, meeting new people, traveling to a new location, they're going to feel a lot more stressful. You're going to worry that you're going to forget people's names and forget your way, get lost, have a fall and be injured. And that sense of vulnerability, that increases your stress response. So each day your levels of cortisol are just rising very slowly, and over years you can see this kind of steady increase in cortisol, the stress hormone.
Interesting.
And then that's linked to things like inflammation within the body. And we know that long-term inflammation can damage our cells. It creates wear and tear on our tissues, and then that predisposes us to illness. If you have the positive view of aging, if you're seeing all these new opportunities and you're still excited and you don't feel vulnerable, you actually can see some strengths that you've acquired as you age, you're just not going to have that prolonged stress response. And actually what you see with those people is that once they retire, their levels of cortisol actually fall. They drop as they get older because they're kind of relaxing into their retirement. Maybe they don't have some of those stresses that they would have had when they were working and they had their young families and had less time to enjoy themselves. And that means that they're less predisposed to illness. And day to day it might not make such a huge difference, but over years, that is what increases your risk or decreases your risk of Alzheimer's disease or cardiovascular disease, and ultimately of an early death.
Well, in the years, that's the hard thing to appreciate, because our average demographic at Thriveology, which is the facility that I own and operate, well, I operate the team basically. They support me and they probably own more of it than I do, but I like to go along for the ride at least. We're probably 45 to 60 years old is our average demographic. And so a lot of the people who walk through the door are people who are saying exactly what you're talking about. Oh, if I would have started this 20 years ago, then, XYZ, I would feel better. I wouldn't be in the situation that I'm in. And a lot of them also have those same sort of mentality about aging. And I fight back very hard whenever I hear things like, oh, it's just me getting old. I got this thing in my shoulder, I got this thing in my knee, or I started forgetting where my keys were, and oh, it's just me getting old. I fight back very hard against phrases like that because of exactly what you're talking about. You get exactly what you expect. What I found interesting, I did an aging series on the podcast recently, and I went and I found this review paper. They had gone back and reviewed the literature over like the first, from like 1900 to like 1950, I believe is what it was, to see how people talked about aging in the literature. And what they found was interesting. Essentially up until like 1940, I believe it was, most of the conversation around aging and most of the literature around aging was written by old people, like people actually going through the experience, people actually living the life of aging. And then right around 1940, 1945, after World War II, it switched to the medical community talking about aging and talking about the diseases of aging and talking about, this, that, and the other thing, and people being people with histories and medical histories and not people with experiences. And I think, like, my belief is, like, that alone is because that shaped society's view around aging. It's shifted society's view around aging. And that alone, I think, has made a big downturn in what people believe is possible in your 60s even. Like, we have 50s and 60-year-olds here who are talking about how, not decrepit, I guess, but like how not in good shape they are. And I don't think that I can get in healthy again and this, that, the other thing. And I'm just like, oh, I just want to shake them. But anyway, that was a little long diatribe to...
No, I mean, I think you're totally right. And I think this is like, there's so much ageism in our culture now, because, like you said, because we're not really listening to old people's experiences. We're kind of projecting our own fears on, older people. And that is, then it's not surprising then that people start to internalize those beliefs. And it's, I think there was, research showing that actually, like, sometimes it's the older people who now are the kind of biggest defenders of these ageist stereotypes because, they've had a whole lifetime of absorbing that. But, there are those people who have the positive views too, and they can be this kind of inspiration to us. I spoke to, like, this lady, Paddy Jones, who's like an acrobatic salsa dancer, like the world's oldest. She's in her 80s. She only started, like, dancing professionally in her 60s, and she's just gone from strength to strength. And you watch the videos of her, and it's amazing. And she's just having the time of her life as well, And that's obviously that's not for everyone. But I think there are loads of ways that we can all push ourselves out of our comfort zone, so we can start questioning those assumptions that society has imposed on us. And just doing that kind of day after day, that's going to help you to challenge the beliefs and to change your own behaviours and to find a new lease of life.
So I also found it interesting on the chapter about nutrition. You talk about so we talk about packaging and stuff here and how packaging could be deceiving using words like healthy and low fat and this, that, and the other thing. But what you're talking about is how specific words will dictate basically your physiological or biological response to the food, which is very interesting. So can you talk a little bit more about that?
Right, yeah. I mean, so there was this famous study looking at people's physiological reaction to milkshakes, and essentially the researchers were measuring this hormone called ghrelin, which is the hunger hormone. It stimulates appetite, and if you have like a good meal, you might find that ghrelin does peak beforehand because you're like really hungry. You've got this delicious food that's coming to you, and then, once you've eaten, like, you're satisfied, your body's satisfied, it's got enough energy now, so the ghrelin levels can drop dramatically because you no longer need to go and like hunt for more food. So that's very established, that we have this kind of peak and then trough in ghrelin when we eat. But what these researchers wanted to do was to see if simply changing the labeling of a milkshake could change that trajectory of the ghrelin, and they found that it did. So they gave participants identical milkshakes on two separate occasions, but on one occasion it was labelled as this indulgent, decadent treat. It was full of cream, ice cream, it was delicious. It was the kind of thing that you might feel guilty about eating afterwards, but you'd love at the time. And the other, on the other occasion, they told them it was this kind of very bland health shake that had, 200 calories. That's not really enough to kind of leave you feeling satisfied, and there was no emphasis on the enjoyment they might get out of that milkshake. And what they found was that labelling, whether they saw it as this kind of fulfilling, satisfying, indulgent treat, or whether they saw it as this kind of low-fat, low-calorie, fairly joyless shake, that determined whether they saw that classic ghrelin response or not. So if they believed it was going to be satisfying, they saw the rise and fall just as you would after eating a proper meal. For the other people, they, on the other occasions, they barely saw any change at all. It just was flat, as if they hadn't eaten. Now, you spoke about deceptive labelling, and I think that's where this is a real problem. If you're having something that's labelled as a health food, you have this expectation that actually it's not going to be that filling and that satisfying, but actually it still has a fair number of calories. So you're not getting the satisfaction. You're still going to feel hungry afterwards, but you've also consumed quite a bit of food. That's the worst outcome for a dieter, to eat loads of calories and feel hungry afterwards. And I think that's happening all the time, unless we're really careful and conscious about what we're eating.
That's really good, actually. And I don't think I've regularly thought about it that specific way. We talk about it regularly about just like, choosing foods in general. Like you said, it's very easy to, even the packaging, the way the packaging looks, the words that they put on the packaging, the name that they name the product, like all of that has a huge psychological impact on whether or not you're going to buy it and whether or not you're going to actually enjoy it. You'll like it more if it says certain things, blah, 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 blah. But I've never looked at it strictly through like, hey, if you're thinking that it's healthy, it still has 100 calories per serving or whatever the thing is. So you're probably going to eat more of it, and it may actually lead to you moving away from your goals versus towards your goals.
Yeah, exactly. And I think there's ways that manufacturers can sometimes create the illusion that something is healthier than it really is. So it might be labeled low fat, but have tons of sugar in it. And, that's not a good thing for people to be eating, believing that it's a health food, and then also having those hunger pangs afterwards because of this kind of altered ghrelin response. So, yeah, we have to be very conscious. But I think more than that, I just think when we're dieting, like, there's often this temptation to only choose things with the kind of number of calories that they have, even if it's like very bland and not satisfying at all. So it doesn't really have that expectation of satisfaction and fulfillment, which is really important for the physiological response. So I think actually, with dieting more so than when we're not dieting, actually incorporating pleasure and celebration and satisfaction into the foods that we're eating is especially important.
Yeah, and we don't, and I believe you hit on this in the book as well, but like, we don't sit down as a family as often anymore, which
Right.
takes away from the, celebration of food. And because of that, we cook less. And because we cook less, we have to eat more, not have to, but we're eating more processed foods, and then it's just like a downhill spiral from there. So it's the system really that is kind of like leading us down this path, and it's a tough one to put a stop on and turn around, but we have to be aware of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And we have habits like watching TV while we eat. That's a psychological distraction. That means the brain isn't registering how much food it's actually consuming. And again, that's creating this expectation then, a kind of subconscious expectation in that case, that we haven't eaten as much as we need. And so there is research showing that, through this kind of degraded memory of what we've eaten, distraction while we're eating can then lead us to feel more hungry later on. We'll actually snack more because the brain hasn't registered that it's already got enough nutrients.
That's interesting. Yeah, just so much around food and nutrition that affects people's health more than we have any clue for. It's much, much more in depth than just calories, like you're saying.
Right.
So talk to me how expectations affect exercise and fitness, because there was a lot of interesting things in that chapter as well around how what you think you're going to get out of the exercise affects what you actually get out of it. So talk to me a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much cool science going on in that area. A couple of experiments like really come to mind have been quite kind of transformative actually in the way I look at exercise myself. The first one kind of looked at people's perceptions of how fit and healthy they were, like whether they had this kind of natural genetic aptitude to doing exercise. And what the scientists did, they were at Stanford University, they gave all of their participants this kind of real genetic test that looked at the CREB1 gene, which is associated with fitness. If you have one version, you might just find exercise a little bit easier than people with another version of the gene. But it's not kind of all-defining, but not many people know that. So I think when people are given this feedback, and they were given sham feedback in this case, about which version they had, you could kind of see it as being, like this kind of defining feature of you, that you're either good at sport or you're not good at sport, that you'll find exercise great or you'll hate it. And what they found was that those expectations then determined their stamina on a treadmill, but also their physiological responses to the exercise. So things like how efficiently their lungs were exchanging carbon dioxide and oxygen. And what was interesting was that these expectation effects were often as or more important than the actual gene itself. So someone who had the kind of bad version of the gene but believed they had the good version, was going to do better potentially than someone who had the good version but believed they had the bad version. It's very profound in that way. So I think that should tell us all that, we might carry around these beliefs about our fitness without really having any good objective reason for thinking that we're naturally a couch potato. Some people just believe from bad experiences in childhood that they're just not going to be good at exercise, but actually, we can question those assumptions, and we can, try to kind of build up our tolerance of exercise slowly with the knowledge, the scientific knowledge that actually everyone is going to respond to exercise eventually. Like, the more you put in, the more you get out of it. The second study that I found transformative was looking at just whether we see an activity as being exercise or not. And this study was studying hotel cleaners who didn't really see their work as being exercise, but actually it's very physically demanding, cleaning windows, moving furniture, hefting really heavy objects around. They were getting easily the kind of weekly recommended amount of exercise that the US Surgeon General had prescribed for people to live a healthy life, but they just didn't realize it. So these scientists at Harvard, they just educated these cleaners about that fact. They told them that actually, you're doing a good workout throughout the week, and you should be, getting physical benefits out of that. They left around some flyers and posters and, just stuff to remind them of this fact, and then visited them a month later to see whether there'd been any changes to their health. And there were. Their blood pressure had dropped from being kind of problematically high to being within the normal range. They'd even lost a tiny bit of weight. And that didn't seem to be associated with any particular changes to their kind of daily routines. It's not like they were eating healthier or had suddenly signed up to the gym. They just seemed to somehow be, through maybe the mind-body connection, they were kind of benefiting more from that activity that they were doing. And there's, lots of potential pathways. We don't know what all of them could be. It could just be that by feeling good about themselves, they were tolerating stress in their lives a bit better, and that was having this benefit to their metabolism. We don't know. It could be that they were actually just, putting a bit more effort into their work, a bit more room. But, even that is a worthwhile change.
Yeah.
So it's definitely a profound result, and it makes me think about, all of those things that I do in my life that I wouldn't have considered as exercise previously, just, walking to the train station, playing with my friends' kids, if I go to visit them, doing the housework, doing DIY, all of these things, we can just try to appreciate them a bit more.
Well, and I think it's appreciating that movement is
Right.
the goal, right? Not only exercise. Exercise, when you do it intentionally, is going to be more intense than if you're but if you're, cutting the grass, or you're doing some work around the house, or you're doing this, that, and the other thing. On average, when you go exercise, it's going to be more intense. Therefore, generally, you're going to get more fitness benefit out of it, more health benefit out of it. However, movement in general, neat movement, non-exercise activity, thermogenesis is going, that makes up the bulk of your day. You can only, the average person exercises, well, not the average person, let's say the average exerciser exercises an hour, 3 days a week, 4 days a week, whatever it is. That's 4 hours out of 168 hours. So your day has a lot of opportunity for movement. And I think that part gets easily overlooked. And that's exactly what you're talking about. Looking at every movement as potential benefit to your health can completely open up and potentially revolutionize your health in general.
Right, exactly. And I do think, I think there probably is a kind of mind-body connection thing that's going on here, but actually I do think if it has a behavioural benefit in that it's this knowledge is actually just increasing the amount of movement that people do each day, encouraging them maybe to have a break and to, just walk up and down their stairs or whatever, like, go and, clean their windows and actually appreciate that as being not just useful, for the appearance of the home, but also for their health. I think that is also beneficial. The science is very clear actually that there's no minimum amount of exercise that we can do that will be beneficial to us. Any extra helps, and anything that encourages that has got to be a good thing.
Yeah, it's interesting. What I'm hearing is like these things start to layer on top of each other, right? So you get to a certain age and you start to feel icky, and you're like, oh well, my age is getting to me. And then you think about starting to work out, and you're like, well, I don't know if I can, because I don't know if I can really improve my health at all. And even if you start to do something, you may be thinking like, I don't know how much I'm actually going to get out of this. I don't know how beneficial it is for me. So it's interesting how these things can start to stack on top of each other. And I don't know, I feel like the further you dig the hole, like it's just a hard one to dig out of, and it's something that just a lot of people overlook.
Yeah, that's exactly how I see it. And so, if we go back to those negative views of aging, if you are 60 and you want to get fit, but you also have this belief that you're going to find it really difficult at the gym, and that you're not cut out for it, you've left it too late, that is going to make the actual physical experience of the workout more painful. Like, that research is really clear too, that you're gonna, the pain is going to be greater if you expect it to be greater, so your muscles are going to ache more.
Interesting.
When you feel out of breath, you're going to catastrophize that, and you're going to see that as a sign of failure, which makes you feel a lot worse, and that might even kind of cause you to feel even more out of breath because you're worried about that you're going to faint or something, so you're kind of working yourself up into this panic. And the result of that is going to be that you're not going to want to go back to the gym the day afterwards, because it's been such a grueling experience. Whereas if you go with this other attitude that actually, any exercise that you do there is beneficial, even if, you're not pushing yourself too hard, but specifically if you see all of those kind of feelings that you're having as a sign of growth. So actually, the aches and pains and feeling out of breath, that is just a sign that you're pushing your body beyond its comfort zone, and that's what you need to do to kind of start building those muscles and strengthening your heart. Like, the research also shows that then that kind of mindset will make the whole experience just a lot easier, and it's even related to things like the release of endorphins. Getting that runner's high afterwards. Well, like, that is partly a result of an expectation effect. If you see the kind of the slight discomfort you're going through as something that's positive and beneficial, you're more likely to also have those endorphins that make you feel better afterwards.
That's interesting. Yeah, that's good. That's real good. Just a lot there. Very much something that, like, I think all of us would just bode well for us to, like, pay more attention to the thoughts that are going through our mind while we're exercising, while we're choosing foods, while we're doing, I don't know, any level of things that have to do with our health and our life in general. Because, it's just something we overlook. We always want to look at the thing. What's the thing I'm going to do? What's the exercise, like you said, what's the hard workout I'm going to do today, or what's the food I have to eat, or what's the, I don't know, the thing I have to do to make more money, instead of what's the mindset that I need to have actually going into it.
Yeah, exactly. It's going back to that point you raised at the beginning, of the conversation, which is like, what's the difference between, like, applying the expectation effect and just being this kind of positive thinker, this optimist. And what I think, like, we've discussed is that in each of these cases, we're actually just trying to be a little bit objective about what we're looking at. And it's a case of seeing that, even something that might cause discomfort, like doing exercise, you can interpret that discomfort as something that is negative and a sign of failure, or you can see it as a sign of growth, and it's just switching between the two without denying the fact that it can be a bit uncomfortable, and you might not necessarily love it at first, but you can change the meaning that you attach to that. And that's what really we're doing with all of the expectation effects, is just changing the meaning that we attach to different events and circumstances.
Very good. All right, we are coming up on an hour. One more question, and you don't have to give up anything. But is there anything that you've been studying recently, or that you've been writing about recently, or that you have not written about yet, that has been piquing your interest?
Yeah, so there's a lot of research that I cover in my book about kind of the expectation effect and sleep. You know, if you expect and worry about having sleep loss, you're more likely to experience insomnia, and you're going to have worse symptoms the next day. You know, so worse fatigue, worse concentration, you know, classic expectation effect. But I've just been looking into research showing that that is also true, and especially true for jet lag. So the more anxious that people are about jet lag before they travel, the worse their experience is.
Interesting.
Regardless of, you know, the length of their travel, the direction of travel, you know, all of those objective factors that should shape how bad they feel. It's all about their expectations and worries about feeling kind of that general malaise when they get to their destination.
That's interesting. That's interesting. I mean, just appreciating the expectation effect for what it is, it makes sense.
Right, yeah, exactly. And that's what I think we're just going to see so many more, you know, new findings coming out all the time showing that expectation effects can, you know, influence so much of our waking experience and even, you know, how well we sleep. Yeah.
Yeah, the sleep thing, definitely, that was another, like, you know, I think maybe on a basic general level, most people understand that, like, you know, if you sit there and ruminate, you're gonna not be able to fall asleep as well. But also, you know, if you believe that you're kind of person, or if you believe like, oh, I'm just gonna have a bad night's sleep going into the night, like that is gonna have a drastic impact on how you're gonna do as well.
Yeah, exactly. And it's, you know, waking up, like, you can have like lots of small disturbances in your sleep, you know, car doors slamming and you wake up briefly. You know, if you have like a kind of more positive mindset, you can just kind of accept that you woke up briefly, but then you got back to sleep and it wasn't like this kind of catastrophe. Or you can like really like dwell on that fact that you didn't have a perfect night's sleep, and then tell yourself that that's going to damage your performance the next day. And it's that belief that becomes the self-fulfilling prophecy. So yeah, it's really important for, you know, how we function day to day.
Very good. All right, David, I appreciate your time. Can't tell you how much I appreciate this book. It was very eye-opening for me. This is something, beliefs are something that I, you know, hang on to, as far as like what you believe is what you get. And I think that this just like very much reinforced that. And I think that more people would do well to read your book and open up their eyes to like what you're thinking in your mind and what you're expecting to get out of the world is what you're getting. I mean, it's exactly what you're getting. And if you start to shift that, it's gonna bode well for you.
Yeah, exactly. And, you know, I think like what I try to show in the book is that, you know, you can start off small, just kind of testing the waters by shifting your expectations, you know, day to day on like, you know, any challenge that you're facing, and that you'll find, you know, you might not experience miracles straight away, but you'll find that they build up, and, you know, over weeks and months, that you will be really surprised by what you can achieve.
Very good. Where can we find you?
So I'm on Twitter at D_A_Robson. I'm on Instagram, David A. Robson. And you can visit my website, davidrobson.me, where there's, you know, links to my to various booksellers to buy my books, but also links to my articles, biography, you know, all of these things.
Very good. David, I appreciate your time, brother. Appreciate you again. Look forward to connecting more over email and something else in the future. But thanks so much for the work that you do.
Yeah, no, thanks for the great conversation. I really appreciate it.
Most definitely, brother. Take care of yourself.
Thanks, you too.
Bye.